Hello everybody, we're doing the class, Lashon Harah class from outside today. Hope the quality of the video is just as good, but it's too nice outside to go in. Okay, so we're talking about that we have 7 conditions when you want to speak Lashon Harah, when you want to say something bad about somebody, and it's for a purpose. There are 7 conditions, and we're talking about one of the conditions is that before you speak negatively about this person publicly, right, and again, it's for a purpose, one of the conditions is that you have to rebuke him privately before you speak about him publicly. And we said if you know he's the type of person who will not take rebuke, then you don't have to go and rebuke him first, but you can you can say it publicly. Now, we said what you have to do though is you have to say it in front of 3 people when you speak badly about him, because if you didn't rebuke him first, the people will say, well, why didn't you rebuke him first? Why didn't you go bother? And it will make you look bad. And people won't necessarily believe you. They'll think you're trying to talk behind his back. You're trying to be very sneaky, because otherwise you would have gone to the person himself first. So we said that the condition is that you have to go and speak in front of 3 people. Now, we learned that an exception for that is if you fear that the person you're talking about is a very strong person who's going to do something bad to you or beat you up, then it's possible you don't have to go in front of 3 people. Now we're going to learn one more exception where you weren't able to give rebuke to somebody, where you do not have to give the rebuke in front of 3 people. So Halacha Tes says, V'im hamasaper muchsak l'rabim ki lo yisa pnei ish kol asher yomer shelo b'fnei chavero osei yidaber b'fanav. If you're the type of person that people know that you're going to say something in front of somebody's face, just like you'll say behind their back, and you're not afraid of him, right? Because one of the fears is that if you don't say it in front of 3 people, you just say it like to one person, and you didn't bother rebuking him first, people will say, well, like, you know, you're probably afraid of the guy, and that's why you're saying something bad, but you don't really believe what you're saying. But if people know you're like a brave person, and you don't really care, and you would say something in front of the guy's face also, then even if you don't have 3 people, you're still allowed to say it. You're not afraid of anybody. And people know that you're a person who only tells the truth, right? You're known as a very truthful person. Then you're allowed to say the Lashon Harah when the person wouldn't, when you weren't able to give tochacha, when you weren't able to rebuke the offender, you're allowed to say the Lashon Harah in front of even less than 3 people. Right? People, this type of person, when you're saying this Lashon Harah, they're not going to suspect that you're someone who lies about what you're talking about, or that you're doing chanifa, right? That was, again, that they said, well, why didn't you rebuke him first? Well, they'll say in their heads, well, probably you're one of the types of people that speak badly about someone behind their back, but when you see them, you're like really nice to them. So if people don't suspect you of that, you have nothing to worry about. They'll know that you're just trying to get the truth out, and you're trying to help a person who was sinned against. And you want to reveal this person's evil deeds in front of everybody, right? One of the reasons that we said you can speak Lashon Harah for toeles if someone does a sin, and we said one of the reasons for a purpose is that, you know, maybe this guy Ruvain stole something from Shimon, he stole his Amazon package, and the way that you're going to get him to return his package, right? You know that he's not the type of person who'll listen to rebuke, so you're sharing publicly what he did, so he'll be publicly shamed to return the package, and maybe he'll even repent, and other people will learn not to do bad things because they'll be publicly shamed. In that case, that's a constructive purpose that you're allowed to say that. But even this condition, and he says that don't forget any of these situations, even though we're only talking about particular examples of the 7 conditions you need for toeles, nevertheless, you have to make sure you have all of the other 6. Because right now we're just talking about the detail of tochacha. What happens in a case? Right, one of the details was you have to rebuke the person, the sinner, Reuven, who stole the package. You have to go to him privately first and say, hey, you got to return it. And we're talking about what if he's the type of person you know that rebuke won't help, or you're afraid of him. So if he's just a person that you know he's not going to listen to your rebuke, he's a sinner, then you could go behind his back, but you have to do it in front of 3 people. But if people know you're a very trustworthy person and you're not afraid to say anything in front of anybody, then you can say it even less in front of less than 3 people. Okay, so let's go on to the next halacha, halacha yud. Okay, v'da'od, deshavan yachad din sipor lashon hara al davar avon sheben adam lechavero, v'sipor lashon hara al davar avon sheben adam lamakom. So until now, we're talking about speaking negatively about a sinner, someone who committed a sin. And we've been talking about a case the whole time where Reuven steals something from Shimon. He did a sin which was ben adam lechavero, meaning he did a sin in the Torah which was against somebody else. When you sin against somebody else, you're allowed to speak Lashon Hara to help the person out who was damaged, and for other purposes. And the Chavetz Chaim says now, there is no difference between speaking negatively about a sinner who sins when it comes to mitzvos ben adam lechavero, like stealing or something else, or damaging, or ben adam lamakom, someone else who sins in matters between man and God, like eating non-kosher, violating Shabbos. However, he's going to say there is one exception. Ach, ba'avera shebein adam lamakom ein mutar lesaper alav afilu yishmu kol hapratim hanal shebesif beis ela im kein ra'a alav she'ochiz ba ve'osa osa kama pa'amim b'mezid v'hu davar hamaforsim l'chol shehu aser v'ayin la'el b'chal dalet sif zayin sheb'yarner davar zeh b'chol pratov. He says that there's one distinction between someone who sins, when someone who sinned did a sin between man and man versus a sin between man and God. When it comes to a sin between man and man, even if the guy just stole one time or he damaged him one time, you're allowed to speak Lashon Hara if you have the 7 conditions. However, when it comes to a sin between man and God, not every sin that someone does are you allowed to speak Lashon Hara about. He says it has to be a sin where it's something that everybody knows it's a sin. Also, it has to be something which he does many, many times. It's not something he just does, one time. And he says to look earlier in chapter 4, halacha number 7, which we talked about earlier, where more of the details of this are discussed. So, for example, people don't realize if you see somebody who gets angry a lot. So people don't know it's a sin to get angry. So that wouldn't be something you're... excuse me, allergies. That wouldn't be something where you're allowed to speak negatively about that individual if you saw him getting angry, because not everybody knows that it's a sin. But if there's a sin that everybody knows it's a sin, right? Like the guy is, he's someone who knows better. Again, we're not talking about someone who didn't grow up religious and doesn't know better. We're talking about someone who knows better, and he's sitting in McDonald's eating a bacon cheeseburger on Yom Kippur. And he does it every year on Yom Kippur. So that's a sin that everybody knows. Everybody knows you can't eat bacon cheeseburgers on Yom Kippur. And he does it all the time. So such a person, you are allowed to speak Lashon Hara about when you have the 7 conditions. Right? You want to get people to distance from him and not follow his behavior. But even if he just did it one time, he ate a bacon cheeseburger in McDonald's on Yom Kippur, and he just did it one time, it could be he had a lapse of judgment, or he had a very strong taiva. He had a very strong desire to do that, and he repented. So even if you only see that sin, which everybody knows it's a sin, but he did it one time, you're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara about him. So again, in this halacha, we just learned that when it comes that the laws of speaking l'toelas for a purpose about someone who does a sin is the same for both types of mitzvos, ben adam l'makom, ben adam l'chavero, with one exception, that to speak Lashon Hara on someone who did a sin between man and God, that's only when it's a sin which everybody knows is a sin. It's people know. And he did it many, many times. And it's not just a one-time thing. But when it comes to sins between man and fellow man, even if he only did it once, then you're allowed to speak Lashon Hara about him. So it doesn't have to be a thief who stole all the time, right? You're speaking Lashon Hara about this thief because you want to help the guy get his package back. And that's the way and that's the only way that you could do it. And again, in both cases, you always need the 7 conditions, and that will conclude that for today. And in a few days, we'll go further and learn more about the 7 conditions about speaking Lashon Hara for a constructive purpose. And if you want to review the 7 conditions, you could look on the class that we gave, which is on chapter 10, halacha number 2, which will be in the YouTube list. Hope everyone has a beautiful day.